Imagine a situation where someone suddenly disappears from their usual social circle. There are no more instant message replies, no 24/7 availability, which becomes immediately noticeable. At first, everything seems normal, a few missed notifications, occasional calls. But gradually, a silence descends and it begins to feel heavy. Those who are used to reaching out for any reason become impatient, and tension turns to irritation. Some are persistent, others turn away in bewilderment, and at this moment, an amazing process begins. Absence becomes a kind of presence. What was once taken for granted turns into a mystery, sparking a wave of questions and assumptions. The way others look at them changes, and with it their perception. The person is no longer someone who can be reached at any moment. They start talking about them differently. He's changed, she's become unavailable, he's gotten a big head. But has the person really changed, or is it that the others can't accept? The loss of control. This withdrawal, whether voluntary or forced, acts as a kind of filter, separating out what was never truly real, what was only maintained by constant availability. Those who leave may have been around out of habit, not genuine affection. However, those who choose to stay on the sidelines present a fascinating puzzle. What makes them not back down? Why do they continue to seek understanding? I'm reminded of an old acquaintance who never seemed to grasp what was being said, but mechanically kept up the correspondence, and then she disappears, as if the author of the lines never existed in her life. Suddenly, a childhood friend reappears, someone with whom contact was lost many years ago, and his sudden appearance is fueled by the curiosity caused by the absence. And finally, there is the person who could never really be interested, but who catches something in the personality that eludes the gaze of others. This voluntary withdrawal from society is not just a whim, but a kind of revelation. It provides an opportunity to look at oneself in the mirror, to see a reflection free from the distortions imposed by social norms. Away from the hustle and bustle, the true meaning of solitude is realized, and, paradoxically, the true meaning of the surroundings. An amazing metamorphosis takes place. As a person becomes less accessible, roles undergo changes. Previously, he was the one who persistently sought attention, worried about the lack of response, and sent reminders after a delay. Now, the situation changes dramatically. Where carefree waiting once reigned, a certain tension arises caused by silence. Absence creates discomfort for those around them. They lose their bearings, not knowing how to interpret the silence, how to define the place of the individual in their system of coordinates. Suddenly, it is discovered that those who previously responded dismissively become more attentive, and those who ignored them feign sudden interest. An unspoken rule is revealed. What is rare becomes especially valuable, and what is too accessible becomes commonplace and banal. This law applies to everything, to objects, opportunities, and of course, to people. By becoming less accessible, a person inadvertently forces the world to reconsider their value. There are people who dislike such changes. They strive to bring the individual back into the framework of familiar interaction. Some of them show persistence that turns into obtrusiveness, and sometimes even aggression. The motives for their searches are dictated not by genuine affection, but by a disruption of the established system from which they derived personal benefit. These people may reproach for indifference, although they previously showed no interest in the presence of that person. The resulting distance creates a vacuum that few can master. Those who stay close belong to a different category. They do not fill the space with meaningless conversations and do not need constant confirmation of significance. These people value silence because they understand its essence. At this moment, the realization of an important truth comes. Those who calmly accept absence are the people whose presence really matters. As silence falls, a process of internal transformation begins. Away from the hustle and bustle, the incessant requests, expectations, and social obligations, it becomes clear that the space that has been freed is not empty. It is filled with the individual himself. What initially seemed like an escape turns out to be a search for oneself. At first, immersion in a state of solitude leaves an unusual aftertaste. There is an almost automatic urge to check the phone, to find a way to distract oneself, a subconscious expectation of a signal from the outside. However, gradually this need dissipates. The moment an individual stops seeking validation from the external world is when genuine transformation begins. Their perspective on reality undergoes a profound shift. Values that seemed immutable just yesterday, the need to respond instantly to messages, constant availability, the desire to please at all costs, lose their significance. Their vision opens to details previously unnoticed, the subtle nuances of their own thoughts, the echoes of their emotions, the secret desires that were pushed aside for fear of being misunderstood. It's as if they have, for the first time, the opportunity to truly listen to their inner voice. And what does this inner voice say? At first it sounds hesitant, tinged with doubt. Was the decision made correctly? Will this lead to alienation from others in the pursuit of getting closer to oneself? But over time, doubt gives way to a strange new sense of confidence. The person begins to enjoy what previously caused fear. Moments when nothing remarkable happens cease to be synonymous with boredom, transforming into spaces for deep reflection. Silence is no longer perceived as a void to be filled, but as a language to be deciphered. And in this silence, an important truth is realized. Never before has the person been so close to themselves. Suddenly, a metamorphosis occurs. By distancing themselves from the hustle and bustle, immersing themselves in a state of inaccessibility, the individual discovers a form of independence that surpasses their wildest expectations, acquiring a strange, almost intoxicating freedom. Previously, their well-being implicitly depended on others, on their reactions, approval, and comforting presence. Now there is an awareness that all of this was just a mirage. One day, going for a walk without telling anyone, the person notices how the world around them unfolds in all its fullness, allowing them to experience each moment with unprecedented sharpness. There is no longer that oppressive feeling of needing to be connected, to be plugged into everything at once. Only themselves, alone with the city, nature, and fleeting passers-by who are hurrying about their business, paying no attention to their presence or absence. And yet, they exist, and they exist intensely. It is at this moment that one of the greatest paradoxes of existence is revealed. The more a person distances themselves, the more power they gain over their life. Previously, they made tremendous efforts to maintain connections, sometimes sacrificing their own peace of mind. Now, they allow events to unfold in their own time. Those who sincerely wish to be around will inevitably find a way, and those who leave of their own accord are doing them an invaluable service. This is where the true power of inaccessibility lies, not in fleeing from others, but in focusing on oneself. Stop being ubiquitous and start being valuable. Stop begging for attention and start attracting what resonates with who you have become. Rare phenomena always catch the eye, mysteries beckon with their understatement, but true charm comes from a person living in harmony with themselves. It is at this moment that an amazing change is observed. Internal energy undergoes a transformation. This is not simply the result of solitude or maintaining distance. It is a completely different feeling of presence emanating from the personality itself. In the past, such a person might have spent time on empty conversations and futile attempts to hold on to relationships that had long since exhausted themselves. Now every interaction takes on special significance and depth. Those around them sense this metamorphosis even without exchanging words. They are always around, but their presence is felt completely differently. Some try to figure out the reason for the change, others feel confused. "You've changed," they remark. However, what they see is not a sudden transformation, but merely a manifestation of their true essence, freed from the need to play to the gallery. This conscious detachment has not made them cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it has helped them to truly appreciate the importance of sincere connections. Previously, they gave themselves completely, often receiving nothing in return. Now they carefully choose where and with whom to invest their energy. They are no longer just present out of habit, but become a welcome guest, and this change fundamentally alters everything. The circle of friends narrows, and only those who do not seek to fill an inner void, but respect personal space, remain. These people understand that a person does not have to be constantly connected, but when they are around, they give themselves to the conversation completely. There is no longer room for inflated expectations or excessive pressure, only mutual understanding and acceptance of the fact that true friendship and love do not need constant confirmation to remain sincere. It is at this moment that the realization of a crucial truth dawns. One is valued not for ubiquity, but for authenticity, for remaining true to oneself without compromising or trying to please at any cost. And then, unexpectedly, something happens. A situation arises that would previously have prompted an immediate reaction, explanations, and justifications. But now, the person chooses to observe before acting. The ensuing silence is not a sign of indifference, but a conscious choice that generates a powerful shockwave. Some panic at the absence of the usual reaction, attempting to provoke a response or elicit explanations, but the person remains unperturbed, fully in control of their personal space. It is then that one understands the power available to few, the power of not being available to everyone. A single restrained gesture, or rather its absence, radically changes the balance of power in relationships. No longer does the individual strive to convince others of their importance. Instead, the world around them begins to doubt whether it is even worthy of that person's attention. There is no hint of manipulation or a desire for domination in this transformation. It is not a cunning plan to attract attention or an attempt to subjugate the will of others. It is a natural consequence of harmony with oneself, of deep inner accord. The less one acts impulsively, succumbing to fleeting urges, the more one attracts connections filled with meaning and authenticity. And what is surprising is that those who previously did not accept the changes in this person's behavior begin unwillingly to adopt their manner. They too retreat into the shadows, immersing themselves in silence as if testing its strength. They discover, sometimes with considerable difficulty, that they have always sought confirmation of their value from the outside, seeking approval in the eyes of others. And then, even if it was not the goal, even if the person did not strive for such an effect, their withdrawal becomes a kind of lesson, a call to look at the world from a different angle. After all, it is not about becoming inaccessible to admiration, but about achieving inner balance, about harmony with oneself, and it is this state of inner integrity that can transform everything around, filling life with new meaning and depth. A turning point arrives when a person ceases to live in anticipation. They no longer analyze every reaction of those around them, no longer wonder who will stay and who will disappear from their life. The desire for external confirmation of the correctness of one's own decisions recedes into the past, and it is in this moment that true freedom is born. Unavailability is now understood not simply as the ability to refuse requests, but as a radical change in approach to interacting with the world. It is not the erection of an impenetrable wall, but a natural selection process that occurs without the slightest effort. Those who are destined to be near remain in the person's life not because of artificially created trials, but because of a sincere and lasting connection. The new version of oneself is striking in its integrity. If loneliness was previously perceived as something frightening, it now becomes a valuable gift. Silence, previously oppressive in its emptiness, turns into a source of balance and inner harmony. It is no longer an escape from the world, but an expansion of the boundaries of one's own self. A change in energy is also noticeable. Previously, the person generously gave themselves away, often out of fear of losing the favor of those around them. Now, every interaction becomes a conscious choice. Every exchange of energy has a specific purpose. It is not about filling an inner void, but about creating something genuine and meaningful. Those who return to the person's life sense these changes. There is no longer the former longing in the gaze, no hidden expectations in the words. There is only a firm belief in oneself and rootedness in the present moment. There is no longer a need to force anything. What should enter life will come on its own, and what should leave will leave, even without the slightest effort. Unavailability is not deliberate aloofness or a cunning trick to create an aura of mystery. It is rather a deep state of mind, a worldview that, strangely enough, does not distance from people, but, on the contrary, reveals the true essence of a person. And as one progresses along this path of self-discovery, amazing metamorphoses occur. Not only does the perception of others change, but the very nature of the personality is transformed. Past anxieties and worries, such as the agonizing wait for messages, fear of breaking off relationships, and the acute need for approval, recede into the past, giving way to unprecedented serenity. There is no longer a need to be guided by the opinions of others. There is no need to please everyone without exception, to be understood, and to always be within reach. The person is simply present here and now, without any justifications or apologies, and this ease, paradoxically, gives them a special magnetism. People are drawn to him for different reasons now, not because he's always ready to help, but because of a certain intangible energy, a rare inner stability, a presence that seeks neither self-praise nor to impress. It is at this moment that one realizes that obsessive availability was never a sign of strength, but rather a kind of dependence. The desire to be always and for everyone at hand was merely a way to avoid facing the inner void, to avoid being alone with oneself. But now that this step has been taken, the void turns into a boundless space where you can breathe freely, reflect, and live a full life. The people who remain nearby, who have shared the evolution of the personality, stay close not out of ingrained habit or a desire for comfort. Their presence is due to the discovery of a genuine essence, connections that do not require constant nurturing to maintain strength, a unity that exists both in silence and in words. Thus, the individual becomes a quiet driving force, not intentionally striving for it, but realizing that true value lies not in the quantity of interactions, but in their depth. And the more fully this truth is accepted, the stronger the corresponding elements are attracted. This evolution, this quiet transformation, is fraught with difficulties. Doubts sometimes arise. Is the search for solitude, the rejection of the noisy social world, simply an escape? Is there excessive distancing from those who have always been there, even if the relationships were superficial? But it is in these doubts that an important answer lies. Solitude is not an escape. It is a return to oneself. It is not the isolation of the soul, but the creation of space to rethink the values of the heart and mind. The initial stage of the journey is always the most difficult. At the very beginning, the individual is left alone with his thoughts, which can sometimes be unpleasant. The absence of external stimuli and bustle forces him to face those aspects of his personality that he may have previously neglected. It is in this silence that one begins to grasp what was previously unnoticed, one's innermost aspirations, one's deepest fears, and, most importantly, one's own truth. This truth is not an instantaneous revelation, but rather a series of small insights that gradually form in the process of this solitary self-reflection. Over time, the individual realizes that he no longer needs the approval of others to determine his own worth. The presence or absence of other people no longer has power over his self-esteem. It is not their opinion that shapes his personality, but his own choice to be sincere in his silence. This silence, instead of isolating the person, brings him closer to understanding his true essence. Away from the noise and the pursuit of social approval, a deeper and more instinctive form of communication opens up, surpassing words. It is a form of presence that is affirmed in space, in how a person exists, not in what he says. And it is at this moment that profound changes begin to occur. Reflecting on past experiences, one realizes that previous relationships were often built on a foundation of mutual expectations, representing more of an exchange of courtesies than genuine intimacy. They were based on the principle of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, where each participant sought to get something in return for the attention shown. However, now comes the understanding that a real connection does not need such a formula. It is born from unconditional acceptance in the space that is freed up through solitude. As a result, one becomes more discerning in the choice of relationships. Each meeting takes on a special significance, becomes rarer, and therefore more valuable. The driving force is no longer the desire for external approval, but the need to communicate with those who are able to offer something genuine, who respect personal space, understand the need for silence, and know how to share this peace. Conversations lose their superficial nature, becoming filled with meaning and mutual respect. Those who remain nearby, who accept the new conditions, occupy a special, irreplaceable place in a person's life. Others, however, who have failed to understand the changes that have taken place, accusing him of being withdrawn and aloof, begin to ask questions of themselves. Perhaps they wonder if their own lives are as superficial as the one they saw in another person. Perhaps they also feel the need to rethink their relationships with others. But this no longer matters, as one no longer strives to meet the expectations of others. The main thing is to find inner peace, regardless of external assessments. This is not a rebellion, but a simple affirmation of one's own individuality. Over time, this dynamic of detachment begins to feel like something taken for granted. One realizes that achieving inner harmony doesn't necessarily mean avoiding or rejecting people. The point isn't to oppose those around you, but to respect your own need for solitude and quiet. It's in this respect that true balance is born, where any relationship becomes the result of conscious choice, not an imposed obligation. By choosing not to react immediately to every request, one has the opportunity to listen more carefully to others. This pause, this silence, becomes a powerful tool for understanding people. Those who persistently seek to understand the changes taking place help one to better understand themselves. Paradoxically, the further one moves away from externally imposed expectations, the closer one gets to the true essence of others. After all, in the absence of an immediate reaction, those around you are forced to find ways to understand themselves, confronting their own needs and expectations, and in this confrontation they also transform. The world around one changes gradually, but irreversibly. It is no longer what it once was. The value of relationships is determined not by their quantity, but by their quality. Genuine connections and sincere conversations happen less often, but this makes them even more valuable. One realizes that the true wealth of relationships lies not in their frequency, but in their depth, in those rare moments when the connection becomes all-encompassing, when words lose their necessity, when simple presence becomes self-sufficient. There is no longer any need for excuses or striving to earn someone's favor. The era of inaccessibility as a tool for creating intrigue has come to an end, giving way to a new understanding of self-identity. This is a conscious choice, a manifestation of personal strength, aimed at focusing on what really matters. It's not about distancing oneself from the world or being insensitive, but about being selective about the circle of people with whom one is willing to share their time and energy. The paradox is that the deeper one delves into a state of harmony with oneself, the more one attracts people who share this desire for inner equilibrium. It is in this shared atmosphere of calm that genuine connections are born, based on mutual respect and understanding. Ultimately, there comes the realization that inaccessibility is not a limitation, but a liberation. By choosing full presence in the moment and focusing on one's own needs, one sends the world a signal to respect their personal space and value what really matters: sincerity in relationships, genuine exchange of emotions, and inner peace that cannot be influenced by external forces.